Hungarian Prime Minister calls for mistake of opening EU membership talks with Ukraine to be correct. Ed. Ukrainska Pravda. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has once again said that he believes it was a mistake to open negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the European Union, as Ukraine is not yet ready. Source: European Pravda. Citing Viktor Orbán during the Fidesz party conference, as reported by Magyar Hírlap. A pro-government Hungarian media outlet details. Part of Orbán's speech focused on his vision for the European Union. Below are your comments. Ethnic minority issues are always tricky, but not all minorities are equal. If a minority in Ukraine wants to have its schools and to speak its language in its towns, I don't see why would Kiev oppose that. But if an ethnic minority neglects its native language, insists on speaking Russian and the real mistake in EU membership is that authoritarian countries such as Hungary are not booted out. We can see the real mistake now is letting Hungary into NATO and the EU when it should be part of authoritarian Russian Federation. Those Hungarians who died fighting for freedom on 1956 must be rolling over in their graves. Empty threats are all these authoritarian leaders are good for. A Hungarian minority simply cannot dictate what happens in Ukraine. If they want that power, then put themselves to the electorate. Next news. US and Ukraine to attend joint defense industry conference in December. Kyiv Independent. The United States and Ukraine will attend a joint defense industry meeting in December, Ukrainian PR. President Volodymyr Zelensky announced in an address on November 17. Below are your comments. President Zelensky confirmed the creation of an international alliance between defense industries will work together to build capacities to defend against outside aggression. Russia will continue to lose this war, and will be slaughtered in increasingly large numbers as long as they remain. The Ukraine war is a lost cause, and the cause was extremely stupid in the first place. Do you even remember what it was? I'll tell you. To prod Russia into destroying itself. Oh, but why? Because, Russia and Trump. Closing parenthesis. There is your blob logic. Cost us something like $150 billion, Another sad joke by ex-comedian. If Ukraine doesn't have funds to pay for its urgent needs for ongoing war, where on earth will it find money to build weapons on its lands? So is Zelensky thinking that instead of paying Ukraine directly, he wants U.S. government to pay to U.S. defense counter? Midgate better hide. Western partners will get his ashole. Most secured place for the swindle. Will be Russian jail. Paid by who? That is correct, the U.S. taxpayers. What a joke. Next news. Russian doctors call for release of imprisoned artist who protested Ukraine war. Associated Press. More than 100 Russian doctors signed an open letter published Saturday that demands the immediate release Lease of an artist and musician who was sentenced to 7 years in prison for swapping supermarket price tags with anti-war messages. The letter calling for Sasha Skochelenko to be freed was addressed to Russian President Vladimir Putin and warned that time in prison could lead to a significant deterioration in the 33-year-old artist's health. Below are your comments. Think that will do any good? This is Putin's court and he controls everything. When he has you sentenced to many years in prison, it is meant to be a death sentence. People can only have so many accidents. Russia, where speaking the truth is illegal and state-sponsored Russian fairy tales has created a legion of vatniks. What a beautiful life in Russia. You can think what you want under the covert. But you can't I nothing against the regime. Not much progress since the czars. Russia is a living example of what the far right wants for USA. When Putin stoops so low as to start jailing artists, that only shows he is scared. Why patriotic Russians around Putin don't remove him? Putin has been a disaster for Russians. Next news. Zelensky announces new steps to enhance air defense. Ukrainska Pravda. President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced new security steps to strengthen Ukraine's air defense in the coming weeks. Source: President's evening address. Quote, "I would like to thank the countries that have announced new aid to our country this week. Below are your comments." Zenny doing commercials. For just the price of a cup of coffee a day you can sponsor HIMARS. Or a Leopard tank for a week. Don't forget he uses those to hit civilian infrastructure like Kerch. Bleep civilians every time. Last time was a little girl's parents' bleep left her severely WOU. I remember the days when testosterone-filled American men fought fascism and anyone that tried to or throw a democratically elected Europe nation. Now they dig into their purses to fund it. It's shameful. I am headed down to protest the airshow display today in my town. You don't get to hold veterans parades or military shows anymore until veterans like me have medical care. Just the way it is for now on. Get used to it. Get off the couch, folks, and join in fun for the whole family. He seems so helpless and worn out. How many more billions are needed to make him smile? Air defense. Ukraine has no air defense. Next news. Ukraine's troops work to advance on Russian-held side of Key River after gaining footholds. Associate Ed Press. Ukrainian troops work to push back Russian forces positioned on the east bank of the Dnieper River. The military said Saturday, a day after Ukraine claimed to have secured multiple bridgeheads on at side of the river that divides the country's partially occupied Kherson region. Ukraine's establishment of footholds on the Russian-held bank of the Dnieper represents a small but potentially significant strategic advance in the midst of a war largely at a standstill. The General Staff of UK. Below are your comments. Mixed reports coming in about how big the crossover is or how much progress is being made. But Ukraine is taking the initiative on a front Russia would rather be no louder than the sounds of their artillery shelling Kherson civilian targets. It's also a clear message that the winter lull predicted is. Any country that supplies weapons or spare parts to Russia should now be heavily sanctioned. Putin's mangled army is stretched thin to the breaking point. Next news. Watch Blinken react to Biden calling Xi a dictator. The Hill. President Biden this week again called Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator, despite touting positive steps between the two nations after key talks with his Beijing counterpart in San Francisco. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was caught on camera reacting to Biden's remarks. After today, would you still refer to President Xi as a dictator? Below are your comments. Dark Brandon telling it like it is. If you haven't figured out by now that we need smarter people running the country, then you are Allah. RGE part of the problem. World leaders are afraid to say that except US. Guess we won't ever find out what Joey was thinking, since he walked away the second the first quest Ion was asked, like he always does. A taser dart might have resulted in the same involuntary spasm. This is classic reaction to Biden's mind-numbing statements always lacking propriety, and a way out. Joe's not winning any friends by name-calling when it's obvious anyway. The West Wingers will be covering this up Monday. Next news. Russian drone attack leaves 2,000 consumers without power in Odessa Oblast. The new voice of Ukraine. About 2,000 consumers were left without power in Odessa Oblast after an overnight Russian drone attack. DTEK, Ukraine's largest commercial energy company, reported on November 18. Below are your comments. Secretary of State Blinken gave Ukraine full permission to retaliate on Russia's energy sector and power grid this winter. Putin refuses to end attacks on civilians in Ukraine. The only way to end Ukrainian civilian attacks is to attack Russia directly. It is the only thing Russia understands. Russia is doing God's work in Ukraine. Ukraine created a world shortage of candles. They bought a massive amount getting ready for winter. They will need them, a lot. And Putin, Peskov call Ukraine international terrorists when a Russian military target is hit. Who? Really, is the international terrorists always targeting civilians? Ukrainska Pravda. More than 50,000 Floridians are still without power. What a bummer. No Russian drones to blame. Next news. Maldives' new president makes an official request to India to withdraw military personnel. Associated Press. Maldives President Mohamed Muizu officially requested India to withdraw its military personnel from the archipelago on Saturday, a day after being sworn in. The president's office said in a statement that Muizu made the request when he met Kiran Rijiju, India's Minister for Earth Sciences. The president noted that at the presidential election held in September, the Maldivian people had given him a strong mandate to make the request to India and expressed hope that India will honor the demo. Below are your comments. Maldives is basically Indian islands and people are of Indian origin though practicing barbarian religion Islam. China will ultimately occupy Maldives. China has suppressed Islam in Xinjiang province and the Chinese government has reportedly arbitrarily detained more than 1 million Muslims in Reduka. And in comes China. Next news. Ties between Ukraine and those aiding Russia to be severed, Zelensky. Ukrainska Pravda. President Volodymyr Zelensky notes that the government will not leave any connection with Ukraine or people who help Russian terror in various ways. Source: Evening Address of the President. Quote, several decisions on sanctions of the National Security and Defense Council have been put into effect. Below are your comments. What's the downside of Ukraine cutting off relations with you? Their current relations with other UN tries is little more than non-stop begging. Would you miss it if a local beggar threatened to cut you off? Did you ever notice that these Ukrainian propaganda sites that Yahoo seems to love almost? He's only doing this now? As far as we know, only Ukraine using terrorist tactics and also bleep its own people in Donetsk. Gotta pick the right side in all this, and that side is Ukraine. A welfare state has no power. Next news. Russia stealing civilian cars in occupied territories to replace equipment lost in frontline battles. The new voice of Ukraine. Russian occupying forces in eastern and southern Ukraine are stealing cars from locals to replenish their losses in equipment on the front lines, Ukraine's National Resistance Center, NRC, reported on November 18. Below are your comments. This is why Russian citizens will be paying their entire lives for this war, to include the entire lives of their children. They will all be indentured slaves their entire lives, just like Putin's Russia taught them to be, except all their labor will be for the benefit of Ukraine. Russian liberation at its finest. Strange, the Russians won't steal ladas. If it's not nailed down, the Russian five-finger discount is in effect. The private vehicles don't have any armor. More Russian soldiers will get what's coming to them. Please subscribe to my channel. And if you like it, please thumbs up.